And our first order of business, if I recall correctly, because I'm pulling up the agenda, is we are going to review and approve the minutes I sent out to everyone, which I hope you all received and had an opportunity to take a look at.
Yep.
All right. So perhaps we could have an omnibus vote to approve them all.
So moved.
I'll second.
You, all right. Voice vote, please. I vote yes.
Chuck, yes.
Josh, yes.
Peter, yes.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, and next we have Ryan.
Hi.
Aye.
For his report.
Okay, so last night I presented the town administrator's budget for those who are new or refreshing on the budget process. By charter, I'm to present a budget within 90 days of town meeting, and then the budget gets forwarded to your chair, which happened today, for you to evaluate and create recommendations for. And then April 26th, you have a scheduled public hearing for the budget that we'll try and heavily advertise. And then May 10th, the Board of Selectmen votes to send whatever budget they're going to send, a combination of my recommendations, your recommendations, and their recommendations to town meeting, which this year is on June 1st. So Susan, how do you want me to go through? Want me to just present the documents for you guys?
Yeah, if you would. I had forwarded them all on to everyone, and I don't know that everyone has had a chance yet to review them. But
It's
yes,
so
yes, if you would.
last night I did the so-called pretty budget, so you guys care more about the numbers, so I'll walk you through the numbers here. The you're looking at a spreadsheet. The top says FY22 draft budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we are.
All right, so just walking down, this is the budget summary. So this is the overall budget, and these top items is revenue items. So I'll walk through them. Property tax estimates, that is last year's taxes plus the 2.5 increase plus new growth. So that equals 7.473 million. You add 2.5 to that, or I'm recommending that we add 2.5 to that. So that is the maximum allowed by state of Massachusetts. And then new growth this year. New growth is a very good number. Last year we had 14.5, which is a very bad number. The 120 represents a lot of new building in town. A lot of permits were pulled for expansions and new builds. And most importantly, we added a solar pilot agreement, which was a project started 2 years ago, just came online. So that's 20 years of revenue at approximately today's dollars, 68,000 per year. So that's why that new growth number is buttressed. Otherwise, it would be about 50,000, which is still a very good number.
Mhm.
So that remains in the budget for 20 years. So then you subtract out the overlay. This is money that is required by state law to set aside for tax abatements, et cetera, and also for our senior work-off program. So that comes right off the top, and you're left with net property tax revenue. So moving down again, last year we offset the budget with free cash. We have done that for many years. You have heard me and others say that that is not good. And this year I'm recommending that we take it out, which is depending on how things fall, it could change. But right now I'm saying that the town should entertain a budget that does not have free cash in it. Local receipts. We were relatively flat with local aid. In last year's final budget, the public library's money was not included, which is about $7,000. We didn't need it for the budget, so that's good. So that's included back in, and then there was a little less than 1% increase in state-owned land. So we ended up with a little bit more in state aid, 625,000, almost 626. So that's a flat number. If you remember last year during dire predictions, we were saying that those numbers were going to plummet maybe 10% or more. which would
Right.
be killer for our town. They have not gone up to the 4 or 5% we were seeing a few years ago, but I'll take level and a little bit more for sure.
Mhm.
And then local receipts. So I'm gonna jump to a different tab. You're looking at a tab with some red and white in it.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is local receipts. So what local receipts are tax, not taxes, but tax fines and other payments, ambulance receipts, department receipts, fees, dog licenses, permits, all the money that comes into the town through the departments. So you're looking at a look back. Some of you are familiar with this from the actual receipts from 2014 all the way to 2020.
Mhm.
And then what we put in the budget last year, that's what's in FY21. That's this column J. And then what I'm estimating. So how I estimate is I took this entire look back. I took out the outliers in each year, high and low, and then took a 5-year average, and then took a look at different factors like we believe that excise taxes will be flat because although the economy is doing okay, people aren't really buying new cars. We also are a little leery of ambulance receipts because at this point in this year, we don't think we're going to hit this FY21 number. So we back that off just a little bit. And we were getting excellent returns on investments, and now we're not, like most people. So we back that number off. But overall, we're looking at an increase from last year to an estimate of 1.295 million. So you could do an analysis of numbers that differed from mine and lower or raise this. I can tell you that in our best practice says you should be about 90% of the prior year's actual, which is FY20. So if you take that number, which is the one I highlighted here, 1.56, we're about 88% of that. So that feels conservative. But if you look at miscellaneous revenue, which is something that doesn't recur year to year, there was 111,000 in that. So if you back that number off, we're actually only about 70,000 over, or we would be at 96%. So less than what we're trying to target. So you could increase that amount, which means that you're gambling that you're going to make that number, because if you don't, you have to make it up with free cash. Or you can be more conservative, and the upside of that is you're definitely going to hit your number and you might generate some free cash. So I feel like, and I always try to do this, this number is a balance between conservatism and not crushing the budget.
Okay.
So that's why I put that number there.
Can you refresh my recollection as to what that $111,000 in miscellaneous revenue was for that year?
Off the top of my head, I can't pull it out exactly, but we
Yeah,
did
that's
sell
all right.
some land. It was a
Oh,
land sale,
All right.
and we did that again this year. So you'll see that a number there as well.
Okay.
And then whenever someone goes out on an injury, we collect insurance receipts. So that was in there as well.
Mhm.
That made up about 60,000 of that 111. I mean, we do get
Oh,
some
okay. Yeah.
miscellaneous every year, but it's hard to say year to year what it would be.
No,
And
that's a bonus.
it would be inappropriate to budget for it because it would just be guessing.
Right. Okay.
So that all of those make up our revenue for the town. So that is a revenue of $9.636 million, or 244,600 more than last year, which
Mhm.
is about a 1.5% increase in actual revenue. It would be 2.5%, except we had to take the free cash out, right? So actual revenue only went up 1.5. And then I'll get into the expense side in a minute in more detail, but the budget matches because I'm to present a balanced budget to you in the select board.
Yep.
So that's a 2.5% increase. I'm sorry, revenue increased by 2.5%, but it's reported as 1.5 because we didn't use free cash. So I had that backwards. I apologize.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, so summary here, and I'll get into more detail in each, but we had 312,000 in certified free cash. This number was less than we expected because revenue went down in the spring during the lockdowns. I'm also saying that we should use 11,000 from the Holden Hospital account to help fund the fire truck purchase this year. So that's a total asset of 323,000 or 323,000. This budget recommends and it matches and adds a little bit to the CIPC recommendation of for 2022 budget of 193,000. And then I'm recommending 30,000 in warrant articles for a total free cash use of 223,000, which leaves 100,000 in reserve, which I've been recommending every year I'm here to make sure we have free cash and some flexibility, especially this year with not knowing what COVID's going to do.
Okay.
So I'll stop quickly to see if anyone has any questions on the summary, and I'll get into the expense side.
I'm good.
I'm good.
I don't have any questions.
I'm all
Okay.
set too. Thank you, Ryan.
So I'm going to bring you high level, and then I can get into any more detail with the expense side.
Okay.
Okay, so overall, it's a 2.54% increase that I'm recommending with, as I said, the free cash usage. And I already talked about revenues. You can see the pie chart of our revenues. Again, property tax makes up the most. New growth ends up becoming property tax, so that's an extension. State aid's a good chunk, and then local receipts, of course.
Mhm.
Okay, expenditure highlights. So I'm recommending a 3.39% increase in the Quabbin Regional School District assessment. So this is a total of 171,000, or 70% of the new revenues, the 244,000 that are new to the town. We got absolutely whacked by our regional retirement assessment, an increase of 50,000, which makes up about 21% of those new revenues. The union or contractual raises make up about 17%, which is pretty consistent with the past, or $41,000 of new expense. The non-union raises, that includes the new contract for me and the police chief. That's 15,000 in non-union raises. And then information technology, and I'll get to this later, the dispatch budget, both were about 6,000. So I know that adds up to more than 244,000. The biggest decrease in costs, besides reorganizations and controlling growth through supply budgets, et cetera, was the Monty Tech assessment going down by 70,000. So that gave us a little bit more flexibility.
Mhm.
That's the second year we've lost 9 students and saw a reduction in our Monty Tech assessment estimate of 70,000, or a total drop of 140,000, or 30% of that budget in 2 years, which is not something we can expect to continue, but has helped us through some difficult times.
Okay.
And I have a pretty good relationship with their business department, and she believes that that number is solid. She doesn't think that we'd have any problem budgeting at that number.
Okay.
Brian, I just had a quick question.
Yep. Go ahead.
You're on mute.
Sorry, I took my hand off the space bar. The 70%, that's the QRSD, sort of the new growth that is devoted, or so that goes to QRSD. Is that relatively a lower percentage than in years past?
Well, we have more it's hard to say because we have more revenue than we've had in recent years.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I was getting at it because with more new growth this year than we've had at least recently, it's sort of like the I don't want to say the problem or structural problem with the QRSD assessment is sort of I don't want to say washed away, but it's sort of mitigated, I guess.
yeah, so the only way to control the school assessment side is to control the growth. Let me just jump right to the assessment because I know there's gonna be more questions about it. So this is a napkin calculation that I did go over with the schools. However, I will 100% caveat that these are numbers that are early, they're estimates, and they're not exact, but it's all we have to go on right now. So It's what I'm using.
Yep.
So the school budget on February 6th, they recommended to the school committee a $37 million budget, or a 6.1% increase in their total budget.
Mm-hmm.
If you take out Hubbardston capital projects and debt, which we pay for separately, it leaves 36 million. These are their state numbers, all relatively flat. And then this district revenue number includes some, what we'll get into in a second, ESSER revenues, plus ESSER is a federal grant, a COVID grant with a different name. And then they put 400,000 in E&D into that as well.
Okay. Yep.
So I'm going to get to the bottom line up front and then go back to do the assessment calculation. So with those numbers, Hubbardston sees an operating assessment increase of 7.96%, which is about 355,000, or 100,000 more than we have in new revenue. Even if you added the $70,000 reduction for Monty Tech, we still wouldn't have enough to cover this number without cutting. So you can see the other assessment numbers here, with Barry at almost 10, Hardwick at 13.5, New Braintree at 2.19, and Ocam at 8.73. What's interesting about this budget is if you come up here to the minimum required local contribution calculations, the ESSER grant, which is assumed in this budget,
Mm-hmm.
is state and federal monies that are offsetting the required local contribution that we normally have. So they either give you a grant money, or they offset your MLC or your RLC.
Mm-hmm.
And that is supposed to help towns pay for what they know is coming, the increase in school costs. So this budget assumes that we don't have a minimum local contribution, or that is taken care of. So 145,000 is already put in to help us pay for our assessment. So what this budget is really asking for is almost 11% increase in assessment.
Yeah.
So that's not surprising. The schools around the state are suffering. We're really hoping that the federal government in this new package that's moving through Congress has money for local schools, because this isn't the only school district to be requesting this type of money.
Mm-hmm.
But as this committee well knows, we can't afford this.
No.
It would proverbially crush the town. And given Hardwick State last year, I doubt they found the income to cover this. And even though Barry is traditionally supportive of schools, 9.72 is not something that they can carry. It's almost, what is that, 600,000 in new costs for them.
Right.
And their budget is not that dissimilar to ours.
Mm-hmm.
So the selectman asked me this last night. How did I come up with that number? Well, I think the schools should get more money, because there's a learning deficit at QRSD that they have to overcome, plus additional costs from COVID that aren't being covered by the state because of Hubbardston's wealth metrics, and because of the regional school in Western Mass thing that they have going on. So 3.39 plus the 3% that's covered for minimum local contribution is almost 6.5%. Without that required local contribution, or that state aid that they're getting, we'd be paying more than our new revenue combined. This is what the town can afford. Could it pay a little bit more? Probably, but you're gonna either take away some of your reserves or cut into services, which is the normal conversation.
Right.
So that is what the town can sustain over the long term, and I'll show you how it helps long term as well.
Okay.
So getting back to the expense side highlights, on the town side, it's a 3% increase over last year, or $96,000 in expenses.
Mm-hmm.
Besides public safety, it's one of the largest drivers of the budget. We said the indirect costs for Worcester Regional were crazy. I asked them what happens if we don't pay that, and they said, well, they just take away it from your state aid. So we're pretty tied to that payment. There's nothing we can do about that increase. The debt service went down because of lower interest rates. and I'll talk about debt in a minute, but we're in good shape in debt. And then we have the capital improvement plan, which I'll talk about on its own, and then the warrant articles. So the two warrant articles I'm recommending with our free cash is we need to get right-of-way acquisitions for the town center project. So ideally, everyone in town would donate the land that we need to take easements for in order to do the town center project, but not everybody does. So we're going to have to appraise that land and pay them for it. It's worth it because the project's bringing about $5 million of federal and state money into the town and revitalizing the town center, but it does have a cost. And then stabilization, I'll talk about reserves as well, but we need to continue to put money into stabilization or our budget numbers go down. And we have a lot of our perceived financial indicators go down, not budget. And if that happens, we are in not as good a position to borrow, which we're going to be doing a lot of in the near future. So that's the expense side. I'm going to get into a couple of these categories. Is there any questions on expenses or increases? Anything at all that anybody wants me to go over further?
Could,
Why are we going to borrow in the near future?
So I'll get into debt service in a second, which I'll show you the future, but we are borrowing almost $2 million for the school roof project, which is debt excluded, which won't affect our budget. It's money that we can tax outside of the levy, but it's a project that we need to borrow for. It's the biggest borrow we've had in a very long time. So we want as good of a bond rating as we can get for that borrow. And then we have some capital projects coming up that I would be recommending we borrow, which would replace current borrowing that we're finishing some debt service for a road project that was authorized in 2013.
Thank you.
Ryan, could you email us the worksheet that you showed us for the calculating the Quabbin assessment?
I think I did, but if I didn't, I will
Okay,
send it along, of course. And again, just to tell you, yeah, it is in that email I sent you, Susan.
okay, great, thanks.
The that assessment again is it's not quite back of the napkin. It's a little stronger than that, but it's not, you know, the official assessment that we get, and it
Right.
assumes a few things that haven't been decided.
Right. Okay, great.
All right.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to go over a couple more topics here. Actually, I'm going to do it in the document. One second, please. Okay, there's a lot of detail for every line item. Try to be as transparent as possible with the budget, so I can go over anything that you want. Okay, capital budget. So the CIPC recommended this budget minus about 55,000, which I'll talk about. And then we were able to offset some of the cost with the Holden Hospital account, as I said. So what they didn't include was I took a little money, I shaved a little money off the police cruiser because we are going to be turning in that vehicle just to make room for free cash and other things. And then the school elevator in Hubbardson Center School, it stopped working for a while, which was not great because it has the potential for shutting down the school if we don't have an elevator.
Right.
And we have enough problems with schools this year. It does need to be repaired. Luckily, they were able to fix it and keep the school year going. We didn't need to emergency borrow or do anything like call a special town meeting for this cost. But we need to include the repair. The repair estimate we have is 48,000. So I added a $50,000 earmark in here for capital, which was unexpected. And then this cafeteria equipment cabinet is something that they're asking from us. 5,000 is the threshold for them to pay for it. I told them I would put it in my capital plan. They do believe, if they had to guess, it will be grant funded. So that could come out.
Okay.
So that is the capital recommendation. How it all fits into the 5-year picture. I'll just show because Maria asked. So this fire truck request is in 25. It's $550,000. We would never be able to pay straight cash for that, so we'd have to borrow. And then 2 years later, there's an ambulance on the horizon. So 5 years from now, it's 300,000, same thing. Very, very unlikely that we would have just the free cash to pay for that outright. So usually we borrow for those types of things. Which brings us to debt service. So currently the debt that we have on the books is a $1.3 million road project. I said 2013, but sorry, it's 2015. So that helped pay for some road repairs in town. We've been paying for that for a while. And you see the last two payments of 165,000 are this year and next year. And then a dump truck that we borrowed for in 2015, also 2 years left on that. We have a fire truck and another dump truck that were authorized in 17 and 18. We'll be paying that for a few years. But that big gap you see here in 24 and through 26 means we could remove $180,000 from the budget, which would certainly help solve our structural deficit, but would give up a lot of buying power that we would never get back. So
Right.
in order to fund the capital plan that we have, and the CIPC looked at it and made the same recommendation, I'm also recommending that we earmark that for the fire truck or the ambulance so we can continue to update our fleet without crushing our reserves or some other funding mechanism.
Mhm.
So we try to borrow around 3% of the operating budget. In 24, that would drop down to less than 1%. If we were to borrow, say, 800,000 to fund those projects, you'd be looking at a payment of somewhere around 125,000 a year, which means that we'd still be able to reduce the budget and fit those in with today's dollars.
Okay.
Just something to consider. It's a year away, but we got to start planning for that type of thing.
Mhm.
Another thing to consider, the Board of Selectmen last night asked the CIPC to look at old studies and make a recommendation about what it might cost to do a public safety building construction. So although this has been brought up in the past, it's never been tried to do just the public safety building. The selectmen have committed to it, and the CIPC have said they recommend it. So the current idea is for the CIPC to investigate it, bring cost and a presentation to the annual town meeting in anticipation of asking the town to support it either in the fall or at the next town meeting. The idea being they want to socialize the idea and get as much public input and transparency as possible to give it a chance to pass. If that was the case, then there is the potential that marijuana monies from some marijuana projects that have been approved in town and this borrowing power would allow for fixing other town problems like roads, the capital budget, as I talked about, or revamping the town office space without going to the taxpayers for more tax increases, which would be a win.
Mhm.
This is just a visual of the 5-year debt projection. Okay, then reserves, these are important. We saw how important they were last year when revenue estimates were not good and things could have gotten much worse. Our goals are 5,000 for regular stabilization, 1% for capital, and 1% left on the table in free cash just for flexibility. For a total target of 8 to 10%. This budget proposes adding some to stabilization, which would bring us up to 4.57%.
Mhm.
Keeping capital stabilization where it's at, which is 0.6%. Free cash, it hits the target. And then total town reserves of 6.21%, which isn't bad in a recession. And something to focus any additional monies on in the future if we were to find any. It would cost about $100,000 to bring us up to our target goals, which lately have been used for funding capital that's been deferred over time. Then it's really important with a budget to consider how it affects the future. So this is the updated financial forecast, different from the one you saw in December. So this includes the numbers that I presented in this budget. So it projects a deficit next year of 199,000. So that assumes that the school budget is 3.39% this year, but would go back up to 5 to 6%, which has been a historical trend last year. If it was to stay at 3%, this deficit would almost be gone, which means efforts that we've done to reduce growth long-term have been working. Last year, this forecasts show deficits of 300,000 to 1.2 million. This year it's showing 200,000 to 900,000.
Mhm.
But cost controls like Monty Tech and holding supply lines down and giving out minimal raises have run their course, and eventually they will catch up to us. So there needs to be some give on the expense side as well.
Mm.
Okay, so lastly, what's next? So this is just the start of the budget season. The QRSD assessment is at that 8% level. So in order to fund that, if that was what the town wanted to do, you could adjust some revenue projections. Like I said, it would no longer align with our goals, but you could squeeze some money out of that. You could also use one-time revenues, put free cash back into this budget, which is not best practice, but it does allow you to fund additional services. You can consider an operational override, which has not been a popular idea with the select board because of the pandemic. You could also reduce the capital plan and put even more free cash in. Those are some options to cover the gap. There are some things you can cut. I did include a 3% increase for all non-union personnel, and you saw the union side was similar. That is in this budget. One of the goals for this budget was to invest in retention in our employees. So any increases we tried to focus there, that could be taken out as well in order to fund an increased school assessment. Now, the fund side to think about, if there was more money, then my recommendation would be to fund town reserves first and then consider adding additional capital projects. So that's the budget at a high level. Certainly can dig any deeper into anything that you guys want me to, or talk about other strategies or what's going to come.
Brian, just out of curiosity, I think it's great that we got the free cash out of this budget. If we had to take the 100,000 that we've historically used, how would that increase? Like if we added $100,000 to the assessment of QRSD, what percent increase then would that be? Do you know, like from last year?
So every $50,000 is another 1% in the school assessment. So that would increase the assessment by 2%.
Oh, so it would still only get us to like, it would be like almost a 6% increase then.
Yeah, 5.5. So let's say you cut 50,000 out of this budget, which would pretty much mean no municipal increases at all, or cuts in services, and you injected free cash back in, you'd be looking at 100% of new monies going, or 100% plus going to schools. And it would only get you to 6.39%, or still 1.75% less than what's being requested right now.
Yeah, I feel like that's where we like what we face every year.
That's right.
Yep.
Well, I think we can play with the numbers and see, and work backwards to see what that would mean in terms of the QRSD budget number itself. They've asked, their budget this year is a 6.2% increase over last year's. So
Yeah, and that's really big. Last year they had less than a 1% increase. They used a lot of E&D last year.
well,
So
that was that was the $1 million push.
That's a number that's unheard of on the municipal side. If I asked you to increase the municipal budget by 6%, you would
Yep.
Laugh when we
probably get rid of me.
when we got done laughing. Yes. Yeah. So I think so. Yes, it's going to be the same as it is every year with the COVID wrinkle on top.
The only difference this year is I do believe that the federal package might include money for local governments. It could come to the town to help with school costs, or it could go to the schools to help defray costs. I do think there's a better than average chance that comes through. Whether it comes through in time for the budget, I'm not sure. But I wouldn't say that I'm without hope there. I think that's a real possibility. That is the number one ask of any municipality across the country. So
Mhm, mhm.
That's only a temporary. I mean, yeah, it gives us a patch for this year, but we're still gonna then face it next year.
well, if you look at yeah, I agree with you. I'm not going to try and argue out of that, but the presentation that they gave added a lot of teachers and support staff for helping solve the learning deficit that remote learning has caused. And there's no doubt that has caused a learning deficit. How to address that, or how the country can address that, is one of the biggest topics at the federal level and state level right now. There is an argument that perhaps you wouldn't need to continue that after 1 year if people were catching up, but I don't know if I even buy that. So it is supposed to be a 1 year fix in order to solve the 1 year that was taken away, but these things tend to continue. So
Do we know if the current COVID relief bill that was passed by the House addresses any of this? Or are we waiting for something further to come?
the way that the last stimulus package went through, monies were given to the state, and then the state decided how to distribute that, and that turned into the CARES Act. So
Right,
we were allocated monies based off population to use how we saw fit to address COVID needs, which was good. I don't know how it would come down this time. It's definitely going to go to the state first, and whether they use that to offset, to increase Chapter 70, right? So everyone's forced to use it for education. That could be a possibility. Or they could just straight give it to the town and say, use it for what you need it for, because not everyone needs it for education, but most people do.
okay, okay.
That's my I don't know. That's an educated way to say I don't know.
Right, right. But the point being that there is some mechanism in the current bill to provide relief to states, and then we'll see how it trickles down.
Yes, and I'm not making it up when I say education is one of the top talking points in that local aid.
Right, right. Okay. Okay, good. Well, I think I'm good. Does anyone
Quick
else?
question, Josh. I'm sorry, Ryan, you mentioned the cannabis income might be coming online. Can you elaborate a little bit more for me there? What and when?
So the two projects that may begin this spring are at, forgive me if I don't get the numbers exactly right, but 59 and 69 Gardner Road. So what's being brought in front of the planning board right now is 2 tier 6 outdoor cultivations, which is 50,000 square feet of growing space. Again, these have to go through the special permitting process and are not under my purview or the Board of Selectmen, or Select Board, excuse me. We have a 3% community impact fee, or a per pound rate for flower marijuana for anything that is sold or cultivated in our community. So this is saying that we believe that marijuana will impact our community, and we have negotiated a rate of that impact. And those are 5-year deals. So if both of those went online at the rate they say they are and they're successful, that would be significant payment to the town. My recommendation with any of that money is that there's no guarantee that after this 5-year contract, the state will continue to honor a community impact fee. It's something that communities argued for because marijuana is not very popular, just to be honest. And some people do believe that it will impact the community. So they were allowed to negotiate these rates to start and see what the impact would be. After 5 years, you have to demonstrate that there has been an impact. So we'd want to use some of that money to increase police and fire services for sure, or ambulance, really, not necessarily fire. Maybe offset some costs for permitting and additional inspections. But above that, we'd probably make more money than we could prove that there was an impact. So that would be one-time revenues, and I would definitely say the town should save that and use it to solve a big town problem like renovating the Slade building, or buying an ambulance. And I do think the revenues would be significant enough to accomplish one of those goals over 5 years if everything works out and it's all special permitted, et cetera.
Okay. Any other questions?
Nope.
I'm all set.
Okay, great.
Some reading to do.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Sorry, I sleep on this spreadsheet for like 2 months, so you can have it.
Well, we'll take it.
I'm not sure everybody on this board knows, but I've been called to active duty overseas with the National Guard. And I will be taking my leave from the town for a year. I did work with the select board to hire a very competent acting town administrator who was appointed last night. The gentleman's name is David Nixon. He was the town administrator in Hadley, which is about the same size as Hubbardston, for 15 years. Every peer and professional organization I involved myself with said that this is the person that we should hire. So I feel good about that. He's been with me all week and on his own dime came last week to meet folks. He is very competent, especially financially, for borrowing, which was important for the school roof project. But this is kind of a long preamble to, he's going to be taking this budget process over from me and helping you with it. The select board has asked that I stay involved in the budget because I will be inheriting whatever comes. And then obviously town projects and making sure everything runs smooth. I will be available even when I'm overseas in some way, and we'll communicate that to you. And David and I have agreed that if people want to ask me questions or him questions or both of us, that can continue to happen. So just wanted to have you hear that from me before people start telling you that I just left.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but best of luck.
Thanks. I'm not very pleased, but this is why they say it's service. So
Feel bad for your family.
they feel bad for themselves too.
Well, keep your head down and best of luck. We'll be thinking of you every day.
I appreciate that. I do. And the support from the town to keep me on board.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Susan, I can get into anything else that you want, or
I think we're good. Do we is there anything going on for the current year that we need to be aware of or keep in mind?
so transfer season is around the corner. It doesn't start till May.
Okay.
We did reorganize some staff. We combined land use and brought on an executive assistant and the finance assistant. All of that equates to about a $5,000 change in the budget, which will need to be transferred. And then Sandy has, she's done a lot of good with tax title. For those who don't know what tax title is, it's people who owe us taxes, like long-term big amounts. We've been aggressive with that to try and solve some of these problems that have existed for a long time. So she's gotten a lot of revenue from it, 20 to 30,000 we expect, but she spent more than what was budgeted, the 5,000 that's budgeted. That's all she has to get old taxes, which, no offense to lawyers, Susan, doesn't last very long, $5,000.
No, I know. No, I
So
know.
that'll be,
That's such a good return on investment, though. She's done great.
so that's going to be a couple $1,000s. So those are some requests you'll see, just so you're not surprised by that. Other than that, the expense side is in good shape. The revenue side, I checked it today as of March 1st. It's we're at 70% of what we projected. So that's good. We should be at 75% by March 1st. And we still haven't April 1st. And we still haven't collected much in excise tax, which just went out, which is one of our biggest pots. That's probably another $400,000 there. So revenue's in good shape as well, unlike this time last year where we were starting to panic.
Okay, great.
So overall, I think we'll have a normal expense and revenue year, barring any significant change in society again.
Well, yeah. When does, David is, assuming the role as of Monday?
Monday, yep.
Okay, all right.
And then the only other thing, we'll be starting to borrow for the school roof, so you'll be hearing about that. That doesn't impact current or next year, except it does impact the tax rate, which is important. You might get questions about it. We will do everything we can to limit that impact. And it's not a huge impact, but every dollar matters. And then I sent you a draft of the town meeting warrant, so I tried to put together as much of it as I could. The only thing that I know of that's left is some bylaw changes from the planning board that they're proposing. And then CPA has a couple articles for things that they want to accomplish. One of them being affordable housing. Another one is a land purchase. So they'll be adding that to the warrant, but it's pretty much all the way there with no big surprises. There's one about the right-of-way land acquisition that I talked about. There's a chance that our lawyers could recommend that we need more than 15,000. That's one of those things where we could spend 0 or we could spend a bunch. It just depends on how generous people in the town center feel. So that's what's coming up, besides the big budget stuff.
How many rights of way do we need for the town center project? you know?
About 60.
Ooh. Okay,
Everywhere from 30 square feet to like a ton of space in front of the rec field, which we don't have to pay ourselves, which is good.
okay.
Is that so they can put in a bike lane?
It's a bike lane, improved sidewalks, much better pedestrian access, and curbing, all of which should attract people to our town center, which would be a big win. Also make it safer for school drop off and slow people down because of the way they're designing it and narrowing it. Once it's pavement from Rutland to Gardner, we're going to make a lot of money on traffic fees, I think.
Yeah.
And in mind.
Hubbardston did have a reputation for that.
Going to solve our budget problems.
Well, we need to get busy.
And pay for the cruiser.
Well, that's right. That's
Be
right.
a goal.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ryan. Do we have any other or new business to talk about? I don't have any.
So you need to back plan from the public hearing on the 26th, I would say. So scheduling meetings, that doesn't have to be tonight.
Right. That's right. Yep. I'm going to take a look at the calendar and also take a look at what Quabbin has set up for their schedule for the public hearing on their own budget, which is usually mid-March. So when I was on their website today, I did not see any notices, but that should be coming, I would think, pretty soon. And then I'll talk to my friends in the various towns and see what they have to say about all of this. I'll reach out to David on Monday and connect up with him and see what his schedule is going to look like, and then we'll put together a schedule for ourselves for meetings through the period up to when we have our own hearing.
Great. I'll be in the States until the summer, so be cheering for you guys and available for any questions. Like I said, the other job's a little more boring than this one, so I'll be looking for distractions.
Well, we'll probably have some.
Good.
All right. Any other business for anyone? Again, I have nothing new to report.
I have nothing.
Good.
All right, Maria and Josh, you good?
I'm good.
Okay. Josh, you must be good. I'm not hearing anything.
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting to hit the space.
Okay, good. Then I will take a motion to adjourn, please.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Voice vote, Susan votes yes.
Chuck, yes.
Peter,
Josh,
yes.
Maria, yes.